In 1987, a mapmaker named Gerald Finch disappeared from a town that doesn't appear on any map. That's not a metaphor. The town is real. It exists. People live there. Children go to school there. The post office opens at 8 a.m. and closes at 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. But if you search for it on any map, any satellite image, any government database, you will find nothing. The town of Harwick, West Virginia, has been officially erased. And Gerald Finch was the man who found out why. Gerald Finch was 52 years old in the summer of 1987. He had spent his entire career working for the United States Geological Survey, the federal agency responsible for mapping the country's land, water, and natural resources. He had mapped coal seams in Kentucky, fault lines in California, floodplains in Louisiana. He was, by all accounts, the kind of man who believed that the world could be understood if you looked at it carefully enough, that every piece of land had a story, and that the story was written in the ground itself if you knew how to read it. He was also, according to everyone who knew him, the kind of man who could not let something go once he had noticed it. In June of 1987, Gerald noticed something. He was reviewing a series of topographical surveys of rural West Virginia. Routine work, the kind he had done hundreds of times, cross-referencing older maps with newer satellite data. Looking for discrepancies, he found one. In a valley in the southern part of the state, at the intersection of two ridge lines, there was an area of approximately 2 square miles that appeared on maps from 1940. 1955, and 1962, and then simply vanished from every subsequent survey. Not obscured, not mislabeled, gone. The land was still there. The satellite images showed it clearly. Roads, buildings, structures consistent with a small residential community. But on every official map produced after 1963, that area did not exist. Gerald made a note in his work journal. He flagged the discrepancy in the internal database. He sent a query to the records department asking for any historical documentation related to the coordinates. He received no response. He sent a second query 2 weeks later. He received a response from a supervisor he had never met, informing him that the records he was requesting were under administrative review and not currently available. Gerald had worked for the federal government for 24 years. He had received a lot of bureaucratic non-answers in that time. This one felt different. He drove to West Virginia in August. The drive to where Harwick should have been took Gerald 4 hours from Charleston. He followed the coordinates he had recorded from the old maps. He drove through 2 small towns and then onto a county road that narrowed and deteriorated and eventually became a dirt track through heavy forest. And then the forest opened up, and there it was. A town. Small, perhaps 300 residents, a main street with a gas station, a hardware store, a diner, a post office, houses on streets with names, children on bicycles, a dog sleeping in a doorway, a town that officially did not exist. Gerald stopped at the diner. He ordered coffee. He asked the woman behind the counter, a heavy-set woman in her 60s, who moved with the particular efficiency of someone who had been doing the same job for decades, what the name of the town was. She said, "Harwick." He asked how long it had been here. She said, long as I can remember. He asked if she knew the town wasn't on any maps. She set down the coffee pot. She looked at him for a moment. Her expression did not change. She said, "You should probably finish your coffee and head back the way you came." Gerald did not finish his coffee. He stayed for 3 days. What Gerald Finch found in those 3 days in Harwick, West Virginia, formed the basis of a report that he never submitted to the USGS. Instead, he kept the report in a notebook, green cover, spiral bound, that he carried with him from that point forward. The notebook disappeared with him. But before it disappeared, Gerald shared parts of it with 3 people: his colleague at the USGS, a woman named Dorothy Ames, his brother Frank Finch, who lived in Morgantown, and a journalist named Carl Whitfield, who wrote for a small investigative publication out of Charleston. All 3 were interviewed in the years after Gerald's disappearance. All 3 gave consistent accounts of what Gerald had told them. What follows is reconstructed from those accounts. Harwick, West Virginia was incorporated in 1931 as a company town, built by and for the employees of a mining operation controlled by a company called Consolidated Mineral Resources. The mine, a coal seam that ran deep beneath the valley, was productive through the 1940s and into the 1950s. At its peak, the mine employed 400 men and supported a community of nearly 1,200 people. In 1962, something happened in the mine. Gerald never found out exactly what. The records had been removed, not just from federal databases, but from county records, state archives, and the corporate files of Consolidated Mineral Resources, which had been dissolved and reorganized under a different name in 1963. What Gerald did piece together, from conversations with residents and from documents he found in the back room of the Harwick post office. Documents that the postmaster, an elderly man named Clarence, seemed almost relieved to share with someone who was finally asking, was this. In the spring of 1962, an incident occurred in the mine. The nature of the incident was disputed even among the residents who had lived through it. Some said it was a cave-in. Others said it was something they found in the coal seam. Something that wasn't coal. What was not disputed was what happened afterward. Federal agents arrived in Harwick within 48 hours of the incident. Not mine safety inspectors, not health officials. Men in suits in unmarked vehicles who sealed the mine entrance, removed all documentation related to the mining operation, and informed the residents of Harwick that the town was being placed under what they called an administrative containment order. The residents were told they could not leave. They were told this would be temporary. It was not temporary. By the time Gerald Finch arrived in 1987, the residents of Harwick had been living under the administrative containment order for 25 years. A generation had grown up there. Children had been born in Harwick who had never left, teenagers who had never seen a city, adults who had stopped asking when they could leave because the answer was always the same. Soon, there was a government presence in the town. Not obvious, not uniformed, but Gerald noticed the same 3 vehicles, plain dark sedans, rotating through Harwick on a schedule over the 3 days he was there. He noticed a man in a gray jacket who appeared at the edge of whatever space Gerald occupied, always at a distance, always watching. He mentioned this in his notebook. He mentioned that the residents had normalized it, that they had built lives within the boundaries they had been given, that they were not in the way he had expected, afraid. But they were tired. Clarence, the postmaster, told Gerald on his last evening in Harwick. "We stopped being angry a long time ago. We're just waiting now." Gerald asked, "Waiting for what?" Clarence said, "For someone to come along who isn't afraid to tell people we're here." Gerald Finch drove back to Charleston on the morning of August 14th, 1987. He called Dorothy Ames from a payphone at a gas station on the interstate. He told her he had found the town. He told her what he had seen and what he had learned. He told her about the mine and the incident and the 25 years of administrative containment. Dorothy would later say that he sounded calm, focused, like a man who had found the thing he had been looking for and was now thinking carefully about what to do with it. He said he was going to write it up, that he needed a few days to organize his notes, that he would be in touch. That was the last conversation anyone on record had with Gerald Finch. He did not return to his apartment in Charleston. He did not go into the USGS office. He did not contact his brother Frank or the journalist Carl Whitfield. His car was found 4 days later at a rest stop on Interstate 64, 40 miles east of Charleston. His keys were in the ignition. His luggage was in the trunk. His wallet was on the passenger seat. The green notebook was not in the car. It has never been found. Dorothy Ames filed a missing persons report. She contacted Carl Whitfield. She called Frank Finch. The three of them spent the next several months trying to do what Gerald had intended to do. They drove to the coordinates Gerald had given Dorothy over the phone. They found forest. The town was gone. Not abandoned, not empty, gone. The structures were gone. The roads were overgrown. There was no evidence that a community of 300 people had existed there 3 months earlier. Clarence, the postmaster, was gone. The woman from the diner was gone. The children on bicycles were gone. All of it gone. Dorothy submitted a formal inquiry to the USGS about the disappearance of Gerald Finch. She received a response stating that Gerald had resigned from his position, effective August 15th, 1987, the day after his last phone call to Dorothy. He had not resigned. Dorothy knew this with certainty. She pushed. She hired a lawyer. She contacted her congressman. 2 months later, she was informed that her position at the USGS was being eliminated as part of a departmental restructuring. She resigned before they could fire her. She never worked in federal service again. Carl Whitfield published a version of the story in his publication in the spring of 1988. The article described Gerald's findings and his disappearance. It described the town of Harwick and its residents. It described the mine incident of 1962 and the administrative containment order. The publication had a circulation of approximately 4,000 readers. Within 2 weeks of publication, the publication's primary advertiser, a regional grocery chain that accounted for 40% of its revenue, withdrew its advertising contract without explanation. The publication folded 3 months later. Carl Whitfield continued to investigate the story independently for 7 years. He accumulated a substantial body of documentation. In 1995, he was approached by a major national newspaper about publishing an expanded account of his findings. 3 days before the scheduled meeting with the newspaper's editors, Carl Whitfield's home was burglarized. His files were taken, his backup drive was taken, 7 years of documentation gone. He reported the burglary to the police. Nothing was recovered. He never wrote about Harwick again. Frank Finch spent the rest of his life looking for his brother. He died in 2019 at the age of 78, having never found him and having never stopped looking. In his personal papers, discovered by his daughter after his death, was a handwritten list of every lead he had followed over 32 years. The list ran to 47 pages. At the bottom of the last page, in handwriting that his daughter described as shaky but deliberate, Frank had written a single sentence. He found something they needed to stay hidden. That's why he isn't here. The coordinates of Harwick, West Virginia are known. They have been published in several accounts of Gerald Finch's disappearance over the decades. Researchers and investigators and curious individuals have visited the site repeatedly. What they find consistently is forest. Dense, old-growth forest that shows no signs of ever having been cleared for development. One researcher, a geologist from West Virginia University who visited in 2008, noted something in his report that he described as anomalous. He noted that in the soil samples he collected from the site, at a depth of approximately 18 inches, there were traces of building materials, concrete, asphalt, metal. Consistent, he wrote, with the rapid demolition and burial of structures. He submitted his report to the university's geology department. The report is no longer in the university's archive. The researcher declined to comment when contacted by journalists in 2015. Gerald Finch has been missing for 37 years. He has never been found. His case has never been officially closed. He is still listed as a missing person in the state of West Virginia. The town of Harwick does not appear on any map. The 300 people who lived there, who were born there, grew up there, grew old there, have no official existence. There are no records of them, no birth certificates, no social security numbers, no documentation of any kind that they were contained, and then they were erased. And the man who found them found out what that cost. Somewhere in West Virginia, beneath 37 years of forest growth, beneath 18 inches of deliberately turned soil, beneath the careful work of people who were very good at making things disappear, there is a town, and somewhere in that town, in a post office perhaps, or a diner, or a house on a street, with a name that no longer exists on any map, there is a green notebook, spiral-bound, filled with the careful observations of a man who believed that the world could be understood if you looked at it carefully enough. A man who looked and who found out too late that some things are hidden for a reason, and that the reason is never the one they tell you. This story is fictional and created for entertainment purposes only.